As a kid growing up, I was always fascinated with flight. Growing up in Alaska, where there's a far greater abundance of small aircraft, bush pilots, if you will, than any other place in the United States, has always given me a great appreciation for flight. Today I skipped out a little bit on work and I'm here in McMinnville, Oregon at the Evergree Air and Space Museum, Aviation and Space Museum, where I was here over 20 years ago with my family before the main attraction was ever assembled. Today we're going to look at a bunch of planes, including the Spruce Goose. Join me, shall you? Walking up to the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum, the audio is being enhanced by a pressure washer. But one of the first things that you see as you're coming up to the building from the main parking lot is this here DC-3, still with D-Day invasion scheme painted. Beautiful aircraft. This is definitely a piece of history that has been saved, although some restoration work seems to be in order. So after a minor amount of bureaucracy getting in, no tripods if you come to the Evergreen Air and Space Museum, I'm standing underneath the replica of the Wright Flyer. Right next to it is the Curtiss Model D, the first aircraft to have a seat. As you can see up top, the Wright Flyer, the pilot laid down in a prone position to operate the aircraft. Curtiss was also the first to use ailerons. You can see here on the outboard tip of the wings, the aileron attached via cables to the control yoke. The Wright Flyer actually used the principle of bending the wing to achieve roll stability. As I walk by the star of this museum, coming over to some of the older stuff, we have an F-14 Tomcat outside with its wings in the fully swept position, sitting out there looking like a badass. planes actually are. This plane here boasting a twin cylinder engine and a propeller that is no more than 4 feet across, a wingspan of maybe 20 feet, and of course what appear to be bicycle tires. Here's another example. This is a home-built aircraft with a wingspan of 16 feet 8 inches. But no more than, I would say, 4.5 feet tall. Here's an interesting plane. Almost a biplane configuration. However, the lower wing is much further forward than the upper wing, with a landing gear built into it. Obviously, no step built into the ailerons, but a lack of flaps. Odd. I see one of my favorite aircraft. It's the Piper. This is the Grasshopper. This would be the precursor to the Cub and the Super Cub. Set up for 2 people. Pilot up front, passenger in the rear. And you can see that the passenger really has nothing more than a sling to sit on in the back. The DC-3 is open, and since I'm not going to be appearing on an episode of Plane Savers anytime soon, I think we should go take a walk through. How about it?
So this is what it would have looked like, except it would have had insulation all the way around, and it would have been fully carpeted. The restoration on this thing was never completed, so that would have been done. There would have been curtains on the windows, and when you got on board, there would have been a stewardess to greet you, probably very young and attractive.
Right?
Because, you know, flying was really expensive in those days, and so 70% of the passengers were businessmen on the company dime, or very wealthy people.
Right.
So you had your stewardess, and she would point out things like, this is your hat rack, because everybody back in the day wore hats.
Right.
And then the size of the seats, today they're about 17 inches wide, I think.
Yeah,
So,
just incredibly tiny.
yeah, and look at all the leg room we got here.
Absolutely.
So, and then if you wanted to see the cockpit, that was no problem. In those days. In fact, I might invite you to come.
Even just walking through here, you can feel every bounce, the suspension.
Yeah. So you can take a look in there.
They did very nice on this cockpit. It's beautiful.
Yeah, they did a great job on that. This was a escape hatch for the pilots. In case it crashed, they could crawl out and
Right.
leave the rest of us down here to die.
Well, and you're standing right about where there's a door
Yeah.
to the outside.
Yeah.
Now, would you tell me why it's called the hamburger door?
Yeah. If you open that door when the props are swinging,
You'll be hamburger?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there's only about that. Metal sheets here that would carry parachutes, and then if they wanted to carry cargo, these would fold up against the side.
Okay.
Make more room. And then they could carry stretchers on them, like on this one.
Fantastic. You know, it's amazing with a little love and care like Mikey and the guys from Plane Savers show. These old girls can still fly. What a beautiful plane. And right next to it, the flying brick. The F-4 Phantom. This is one of my favorite planes. It just goes to show that aerodynamics really don't matter when you strap two giant fucking jet engines to it. This, of course, would have been a Navy plane for carrier operations with the fold-up wingtips. But definitely a cool damn plane. Hanging from the ceiling are many small aircraft, including some helicopters, some of the larger aircraft over here, flying boats. Of course, when we speak of flying boats, we cannot forget to talk about this absolute monstrosity. But sitting right underneath it, a couple really cool helicopters. The Huey and the Cobra. We've got a video here describing the history of the Hueys. But looking at this aircraft, I wonder that it survived many combat missions, with just absolutely how thin the fuselage is on these. And a window right at the pilot's feet. Alright, we're leaving the main building, still with the sound of the pressure washer enhancing the audio, and we're going to head across the courtyard to the space side of things. As we walk across, let's see some of the other stuff that they've got sitting out here. This is an F5 Tiger II. Very cool plane. We've got one of the Blue Angels planes sitting out here. And it looks like there's a dirty commie plane over there. MiG-29 Fulcrum. But that is the swept wing variant of the Tomcat. I don't even have any idea what these two planes are. Of course, we've got a 747 sitting in front of them. This thing looks like it needs, well, both these guys look like they need restoration. We've got a little Navy jet over here. That, I have no idea what that is. It looks like a twin engine Cessna or Beach, something, I don't know. As much as of a aviation enthusiast as I am, I can't tell you every single make and model of every single plane, but I do love them for sure. Alright, we're over here at the space side of the Evergree Aviation and Space Museum, and when you walk in, you're greeted to a replica of the V2 rocket, which is amazingly cool to see. And up top, looks like a pulse rocket. Of course, this is the Robert Goddard rocket right here. Very primitive device. Not something unlike you'd see some redneck build. This guy up here. It's cool, you can actually see control surfaces on the bottom of each fin that would be used to help aim, guide the rocket to its intended target. Hanging from the ceiling is a Photon capsule. This is a Russian-built, unmanned, similar to the Vostok, which would have carried the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. Be cool if it was hanging just a little bit lower so I could see into it. So in here we have a Mercury capsule. Oh, and some of the training. You can see this would be a model of the centrifuge, hand crank powered. Lighting in here kind of sucks, but you can see how they would have slung the astronaut candidate around. And this is one tiny cockpit. You can see right inside here, the astronaut would have been head up. And you can see the shoulder straps, the radar, and then all of the other switches. So those three white handles say pitch, yaw, and roll. I'm going to assume those are control inputs. Very, very simplistic design, but these are the capsules that first carried our astronauts into space. As we're walking around here, we can see a Gemini capsule hanging from the ceiling above us here with a mannequin, another anthropomorphic testing device, sorry, out on a spacewalk, and that's what the Gemini mission was designed to do, test the feasibility of spacewalking and docking in space, along with long-term space flights. And you see if one guy wanted to get out to spacewalk, both sides, well, the whole cockpit or the whole capsule would be depressurized, so there's no separation between the two doors. Continuing to walk around, here's a Titan II missile that would have been used to carry the Gemini spacecraft aloft. Also used as a intercontinental ballistic missile. This would be a Titan II launch silo. Speaking of silo, let's follow that staircase down and see where it goes. See, we have a room off to our left here, but right hand rules, and we're going to continue down the stairs. Now here we have the underside of the Titan II missile, including a somewhat authentic emergency phone. See, look, the two Aerojet rockets, and looking straight up. What an incredible view. Heading back up, let's go ahead and check out the Titan launch control replica of what a Titan missile silo launch control center would look like. Now this is really cool. Here's your lunar lander. What I find really intriguing is one, just how small that door is right there. That would be your ingress and egress point and your ladder. And you can see the ladder is a good meter off the ground or off the pad, because the scientists originally thought that the surface of the moon was going to compress further than it did, and so they left that ladder higher. So to get up, it was quite a jump to get back up to that rung. And you can see that triangular window would have been the window that I believe Neil Armstrong would have looked out of during the landing. One of the antennas there, another antenna up on top there, and then of course your pack of RCS thrusters. So your antennas here, you would have had, I'm pretty sure these are your high gain antennas. Sorry, I'm not even looking at it. These would be your high gain antennas, and then that little guy there would be your omnidirectional antenna. I'm not sure though. Like I say, I'm just making shit up. But you've got your ascent stage and then the descent stage. Some of the tools that they would have used in collecting their samples. Now, a lot of people always talk shit about how, oh, you wouldn't have been able to fit something the size of that moon buggy on the lunar lander. And that's actually not true, because around each side where you don't have a leg, there's a storage compartment. Some of them are used normally for things like life support, for your oxygen and things like that, but a couple of them actually were left available for just a thing like taking a buggy to the moon. And then of course the buggy was built to fold up and be loaded prior to launch, and when they touch down on the surface of the moon, open up, unfold, click into place with a few pins here and there, and allow them to explore the surface of the moon. Now from back here, I just noticed this, right above that leg on the descent module, you can see the bell for the ascent engine. The ascent engine sat right in the middle of the ascent stage. The astronauts would have sat almost directly on top of that. Here we have a lunar lander simulator, which is actually really cool, because the astronauts would have been standing up while they were flying the lander. The hatch underneath their main control panel, and of course we have the disk key, and then all of your switches up here, and then your periscope for your starfinder to program the guidance computer. So I just stumbled into kind of a back section here away from the space area. There's a bunch of helicopters here. Let's go look through before we get back to the rest of the space stuff. A couple Sikorskis. And it's amazing just how small these things actually are. You see these things in the movie and they look huge. But they're really not all that damn big. That cockpit is ridiculously small for the size of the aircraft. Small personal helicopter, the rotor cycle. Some basic gauges down here. Your collective. And then this is actually attached directly to the cyclic. This would control your pitch and your roll. And of course, the pedals control your tail rotor. This is interesting. This is a flying platform, replica of one anyway. And you can see down inside you have twin counter-rotating props. You would stand where the feet pads are there. And of course, very close to the belts. You have two flat 4 engines providing your power. And then these vanes provide your control surfaces, which would be controlled by your hand control here and your throttle right here. Walking away from the helicopters now, and we're coming up to one of the coolest airplanes ever built. It's big, it's black, and it is one of the fastest, if not the fastest. Well, the second fastest. The SR-71 Blackbird. Turn around and look up. We have the North American X-15 that would have been carried underneath and launched underneath the wing of a B-52 and achieved a maximum speed of almost Mach 7, making it the fastest plane in existence. Not the fastest production plane, but the fastest experimental plane, although some people dispute this because it was rocket powered, whereas the Blackbird was turbine powered. The other argument for the X-15 not being the fastest plane is the fact that it could not take off on its own, and once it ran out of fuel, which was relatively quickly, it became an unpowered glider that had to land on a dry lake bed. Now, mixed in with some of the space stuff over here, one of my favorite airplanes, the Warthog, the A-10 Thunderbolt. Just an amazing piece of military hardware. Basically a plane built around a gun, which you would normally have the opposite way around. However, the Vulcan cannon stretches a good 10 feet back into the fuselage of the aircraft. I don't know if you can see there you can, the rifling inside that barrel. This here is interesting. This is the replica of the Vega spacecraft that the Soviet Union launched to Venus. This spacecraft would have been the only spacecraft to send back color pictures from the surface of the planet Venus. Right next to a replica of the X-38. Walking around, I stumbled across this little guy, and this was the inspiration for one of my favorite vehicles. This is the BD-5, designed and built by Jim Beatty. This was a home-built aircraft. Very simple. This was actually a jet, so a home-built jet. Unfortunately, Jim never found or was able to secure the proper engines for these, so a lot of people kind of made do and bought their own jet for it, but this was a very unique vehicle, a very unique plane that led to a very unique vehicle designed by him and a gentleman named Ed Butcher, the Lightstar Pulse. Here I am underneath the wing of the Spruce Goose, taking a little bit of time just to kind of take it all in. Thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel here. I hope you enjoyed my little tour through the Evergree Aviation and Space Museum. We'll see you on the next one.